There are cities and areas in the country where water is privately controlled and delivered, okay? And so the advantages and disadvantages of that. But he talks about other things, about this idea of public-private partnerships in solving our water issues, and how much innovation really is necessary to solve the problems that we're facing here in the West. So this is an excellent book. It's pretty easy to read and really easy to understand. So I highly recommend that. Okay, liquid asset. Okay, so you're here today because of my title, hopefully, that I'm going to talk about the social value of water and then how it applies to specifically to aquifer storage, putting water in the ground and storing it. Okay? So I'm guessing, I'm going to go out on a limb and say, you've never heard of this idea or heard of the word social value of water. Okay? So I'm going to hopefully help you understand a little bit about what that means. Okay, social value. So I have this slide up here, and you'll see that at the end of my presentation. Okay, so I have 5 different bullets about why. Why do we need a social value of water? Okay. So bullet number 1 says it ensures this equitable allocation. Okay. It ensures an equitable allocation of water across different entities. Okay, and I'll explain that as we go along. Okay, why do we need a social value? It also enhances the community well-being. That seems very positive, right? If something enhances our community well-being, that seems like it has some worth. Third bullet. It supports sustainable management. We want something sustainable. So adding or including or building a social value, if that gives us some sustainable future, that seems like it's worth it. Okay? It maximizes the economic benefits. And this is probably going to be the focus of some of the number of my slides, okay? It maximizes the economics. Okay. How many economics majors or economics people do we have here? I don't see any. Oh! So I could tell you anything about the economics, and you'll go, oh, yeah, it must be true. Okay, so it maximizes the economic benefits. And then the last one that's really important is that it informs policy decisions. Okay? So that's really important as us, as a community. We want to influence good policy making. Okay? Okay, so let's look at traditional value. And let's look at it kind of here in Utah. Okay, let's look at 2 different ways, from 2 different ways. From an agricultural aspect and a municipal aspect, right? So from an agricultural value, I spend $1 or I spend money to use water to grow a crop that I sell, right? Or I use water to grow some livestock that I sell. So the economic value is pretty easy to understand, right? And that's a traditional, and it's all about the productivity. So the more crops I grow, the more livestock that I have that I can turn around and sell. That's the measure of that economic value. Okay? So from a municipal side, how do we value water? Well, part of it is based on how much we are willing to spend to have clean and abundant water, okay? So when you turn on the tap or you get in the shower and there's water, how much are you willing to spend to have that? Okay? So that is that value of water. Okay? And obviously, built into that is our well-being, right? We want to maximize that. We live in a state that, aside from a few remote areas that sometimes are really water stressed, for the most part here in Utah, we are blessed with amazingly pristine, abundant water. And when I say abundant, I mean you don't have to worry about when you go into the bathroom and flush the toilet or turn on the shower, that's going to happen, okay? So we are blessed with that. And when you go get a drink, you're not going to get sick, okay? So we're pretty blessed here in Utah. Okay, so when I talk about this overall social value, what I'm doing is I'm going to sum all of the values together, okay? And I want to maximize that sum, okay? So that's what I'm talking about. Okay, so this is a cartoon by Pat Bagley, who writes for the Tribune. He made this cartoon a couple years ago, and this is a very big step. So for the first time ever in Utah, we now have everybody at the table, okay, to talk about our water issues. And that's really important. And so we can kind of look at each of those people at the table, and we can call those institutions, right? We'll give them that name. It's like, because they all have their own agenda, right? They all have their own needs, and they all have their own amount of water. And some of them may not have any water. And what's important here, and you'll see this at the end, it's really important to understand that there's at least one person or one institution that's not at the table, okay? And who might that be? It's the future, okay? It's our children or our children's children. Whoever's in the future, they're not at this table. And maybe who's not at this table, let's say maybe some environmental justice or poor or disadvantaged groups may not be at this table, but certainly the future users are not at this table. Okay. So going back to this idea of social value of water in the traditional sense, there are some policy things that have to happen and that have happened here in Utah recently to allow this to actually fulfill the idea. And that is these two policies that were changed in the Utah Code in 2022 that said, hey, if we put water or we leave water in a stream, that is beneficial. That has value. Prior to 2022, that was not the case. In Utah Code, water left in the water for nature did not have any value. Okay? Another code that changed was the idea if I put water in the ground to store that for later use, that has value. Okay? So it's important to understand that we actually have to change laws, policy, to promote this idea of social value. Okay, so here's where the economics come into play. Okay, so this is, but it's pretty easy to understand. Okay, on the x-axis we have water. Okay, the amount of water that's used. And on the y-axis here, we have this social value. And we want to what? We want to increase that social value. Okay? So in this case, if we use a little bit of water, it has a little bit of social value. But if we want to increase that water use for that particular entity, what does it do? It increases the social value. Okay? So if we compare municipal use versus ag use, we know what? Agriculture uses way more water, right? So on the right here, we have this great, much more amount of water that's being used on the agriculture, and here is that value, that social value. But this is the important thing. This is like the key thing of this graph here. If I decrease that amount of water, and you can see this delta, this change in social value, what do we see when we compare that to municipal? For the same amount of water, so I take X amount of water that was used for ag and put that for municipal, it has a much bigger social value increase, right? So that's the key. Okay? And remember that the social value is the sum across all users. So the idea here and remember the 5 things of why we want a social value is by moving water from one entity or one institution to another now doesn't mean, I'm not saying it guarantees, but it often will increase the social value overall. Okay? So this is going from one to another, and I just picked municipal and agriculture. Okay? So we can also do the same thing for not just municipal and ag, but we can do it for, say, nature. Okay? For a particular stream or a particular fish or whatever, something, some natural entity. If I move water from one institution to nature, I can increase the social value. Okay? So it's moving water from one area to the other increases social value. Okay, so I have this question. Okay, how do we assess social value with aquifer storage? Again, I want to put water in the ground. I asked ChatGPT, hey, can you tell me how we assess that social value with aquifer storage? And it comes back and it says, well, here are the 10 different ways that we can assess that. By community engagement, equity access, health and well-being, economic impacts, environmental sustainability, cultural and recreational values, resilience and adaptation, risk management, stakeholder collaboration, and monitoring and evaluation are all things that we can do to assess the social value of aquifer storage projects. Okay, and I'm like, oh yeah, good, ChatGPT, it solved our problem. Okay, so what do we have? What's the challenge we have? Well, I think we know the challenge. We live in the second driest state, and water is very important. And it's very important to get water to the Great Salt Lake. It's very important that we have water for the future. Okay? And if you look at any study that's done, you can tell that the population is going to increase, and at some point, whether we conserve or not, we are going to exceed the currently developed volume of water. We're going to pass that. And then we're like, now what? Now what do we do? And obviously we're trying, and we're very diligent in trying to figure that out now, right? But it's important to kind of remember that time is coming unless we put steps in, which we are. Okay? So if we look at the last 100 years or so, this is very typical here in Utah, right? That we have good years and bad years. We have very wet years and very dry years. Okay? So think about this social value, okay, right? We're putting water, we're moving water from one area to another. And in this case, we're using water in wet years as an insurance policy, right? So that we can use that later on, okay? So like kind of an insurance value, okay? So how does that work with our graph, okay? So when we have lots of water, here, high surface water years, you know, we have abundant water and we have this social value here, okay? There's a very low value of groundwater. So it's kind of like you can kind of think of it buy low, sell high type thing, right? Buy low, sell high. And then in years where there's not a lot of water, then groundwater becomes higher worth. So we store water in the ground when it's abundant, and then we can use that water when it's not so abundant. Okay, and we know that the long-term trend is going less and less water. Okay. Okay. So how does that apply to aquifer storage projects, or what are the constraints, or what are the things that we struggle with? We want to put water in the ground to enhance water security, to provide greater resilience to our communities, to provide equitable access to everybody, and also as an economic activity for not just the present, but also in the future. Okay? So those are kind of the challenges and the benefits of storing water in the ground, especially when we have an abundant. Okay? So I just have a couple of examples of where we do this here in Utah. Okay? So Weber Basin, they take water out of the canyon, divert it, put it into the ground, and then pull it out down gradient, you know, below where they injected it into the ground. Okay? Dallin next door in the previous talked about the Provo project, where we're taking water out of the Provo River and pumping it back up to the mouth of Rock Canyon and other areas and putting that into the ground, where it eventually gets to Utah Lake, but it is stored underground instead of evaporating when it gets to the lake. Okay? But there's challenges. There's challenges because why? Because we want water to go to the Great Salt Lake. So any kind of diversion that you know complicates that is a difficult, and we have to make difficult decisions. Okay? The biggest aquifer storage project in the state of Utah is in Washington County at Sand Hollow, where the water comes and it goes into Sand Hollow Reservoir and it slowly seeps into that sandstone aquifer. And the whole idea of the Lake Powell pipeline was to store water in the ground, to take water that belongs to Utah in the Colorado system and pipe it 140 miles and store it in the ground. Okay? Okay, so just a couple more slides here. This kind of goes back to the economics again, okay? Traditionally, if you think of Wall Street, I want to maximize my stocks, okay? Buy low, sell high, the traditional water markets. And there are a few water markets out here in the West, okay? This traditional sense of a functional water market. Okay? And so we have those, and we're trying to build those and grow those. But they do have some disadvantages. And probably the two big disadvantages that I see, or the three, is that they might be efficient. Hey, I have water. Do you want to buy it? it's going to cost you this amount. Okay, that sounds like a good price, I'll buy it. Okay. The disadvantage of that is it's not always equitable or fair, and especially for disadvantaged communities that don't have funds to buy stocks, Apple or Microsoft or whatever, or water, or the future, because they're not here. Okay? So really, this really is important to consider when we're talking about this social value of water. Okay? That we really have to consider all of the people at the table. All of the people at the table we have to consider. But the beauty is it's happening, and people are at the table. I remember it wasn't too long ago when the ag industry, and I certainly do not mean to be, this is not an insulting in any way, because there might be people here from the ag industry, but I remember it wasn't too long ago when the ag industry's attitude was, well, you want to eat, right? Okay, then shut up. Don't bother me. Leave our water alone, and don't talk to us. Okay, that's no longer the case. The ag industry is fully engaged in trying to solve the problems here that we have in Utah. The growth, the Great Salt Lake, and our food security. So having everybody at the table is a really good thing, including our legislatures. And I have the ability to, to interface with them, and a lot of them have been very good and very engaged, and quite often they come here to this event. Okay, so going back to the end here, the social value. Why is this important? To ensure equitable allocation, enhance the community well-being, support sustainable management, maximize the economic benefits, and inform policy decisions. Okay? So hopefully you learned a little bit of economics. Hopefully you learned a little bit more about aquifer storage. And I appreciate that you are coming and giving up your day to come here and engage on water-related and air and other issues here within our state. So thanks for your attention.
We have time for a couple questions.
Hi, thank you. I wondered if you could explain a little bit to me the curve that you're using to describe the social value of water and what decisions are going into that. I noticed different places where it's crossing the x-axis and different shapes, and I don't know enough about economics to understand that decision.
So the idea is that as we use more water, the social value increases to a point, and then it doesn't increase anymore. So yeah, so like let's say a farmer. The easiest way is to picture a farmer, okay? And let's say the farmer needs 100 feet of water to grow his crops, and he has water rights for 200 acre-feet, okay? The thought process is like, I'm not wasting this water. I'm going to figure out how to use this, but in the end, only 100, once you get to 100 acres, 100 feet, acre-feet of water, that's all he needs to grow. And so he's not getting anything more because he only has this amount of land to plant on. That's one way to look at it. But you can look at it the same in the municipal sense, right? You're not going to go home and just turn on the shower and go, I'm going to shower tomorrow, but it doesn't matter because I'm just going to let the water run. You're not going to do that. Okay. Yeah, question in the back. Oh, right here. Okay, here.
Hi, I'm interested in how you quantify social value and perhaps different ways to quantify different social values.
Yes, that is a difficult, it is difficult to quantify. I don't have an easy answer for you outside of the examples that I gave you that said, okay, if we're looking at ag and municipal, or ag and say the Great Salt Lake, then I would look at that from a quantifiable, we have code that says if a farmer saves water through optimization of his crops and is willing to give up the water rights that he saved to the Great Salt Lake, that is quantifiable. That has a value here, and now the Great Salt Lake has that value. What Compass Minerals did has a quantifiable value. Okay, so in some cases it's a little easier, but generally it's difficult. Why? One, because we don't do it. We haven't done it, so we don't know how to quantify it, except for in this qualitative sense.
So I would argue then that, especially in the examples you just gave, I would qualify those more as economic values rather than social values, where, it didn't seem to be that included social values such as cultural values of water.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to this. So this is ways you can, more than, in addition to economics, you can, obviously, if there's water and the fish habitat thrive, that doesn't necessarily have an economic value in itself. It could, but yeah, that's definitely a way that you could quantify that.
In other words, water might have high social values that are in no way tied to anything tangible or economic at all.
Yes, and that's why we look at the sum of it across all of the users. And that may be the Great Salt Lake, it may be fish habitat, it may be us as people.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Okay, yep.
So some of the areas that you're looking at putting water back into the ground, we've historically overused that water. This is a global problem. So we've basically created a massive credit card debt by taking the water from the surface down, say, 200 feet. So now we're putting back in. So when you put a graph up that has here forward, the zero should actually be way above the bottom.
I'm not arguing that.
And sometimes it seems like we'll continue to try to maximize the economic benefits to fill that back in so we can continue to develop without considering that we're just trying to get to baseline. So how does that fit in to the calculus? And it's not only the addition or the sum, but it's the incremental calculus of important parts of the system. Yeah. How does that fit in?
Yeah, well, you can, let's take, for example, the city of Provo, okay? This is why they were so interested, because if you went to Dallin's talk 2 talks ago, you saw they showed how all of their wells were decreasing over the last 30 to 40 years, anywhere from 1 to 2 feet. And the city said, we're not going to fill it back up ever. That we're never going to do that anywhere here in the state by storing water. It's just the amount of water we would use is just too great. But if we can slow that trend down or stop that trend, then that's better. And that has a direct economic benefit, because for every foot that you have to pump higher, more out of the ground, it costs money. For every foot. So in 10 years, if that's dropped 20 feet, you have to pump 20 more feet out every single day. That is an expense. And if you can put water in the ground that slows that down or stops that, then you kind of slow or minimize that expense. That answer, give you an example? Okay, I can talk to you.
Okay, that's all we have for time, so let's give Jeff a big round of applause.
Thank you.